the idea that your brand is not a brand. Your brand is a protagonist. Okay, when you are trying to be, okay, because you are not your brand. Okay, as much as you like to think that you are not your brand is an exclusive creature, is an exclusive person of its own. It's in fact, it's more of a person than you will ever be. Your brand is the most like it has to be idealistic, it has to be larger than life, but it also has to be human. And this is where the idea of archetypes comes in. Okay, the idea of archetypes was first sort of postulated in the early 1900s by Carl Jung, a predecessor of Sigmund Freud, and a lot of like psychoanalysis and whatever comes from that. And to explain to you what archetypes are, it's basically stereotypes, but the most idealistic version of stereotypes. Like and basically he sort of like brought forth like about 12 archetypes of human behavior, of ideal or whatever, but ideal human behavior, and all of them sort of exist, sort of teeter around the idea of the ideal self, but at the same time it has different variations and versions of its own, because you can't all be the idealistic sort of boy scout or whatever, like all superheroes, for example. And I'm going to be using a lot of superhero examples, so guys, just get ready for that. Like if you haven't watched superhero movies, please start watching them, because they are the perfect examples of archetypes in play. So so for me, like to explain like archetypes, I have to take the example of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, I hope most of you have seen. Yes, and Abhinav, to answer you, yes, I am on Mars right now. I have talked to Elon Musk, and we have sort of like figured out a little leeway. We have sort of figured out a wormhole situation, but we'll talk about that later. But no, but to say that like, so almost every archetype is perfectly represented in characters that Marvel has shown us, either in their movies or their comic books. And I'm going to discuss like all of them, but I'm going to focus on some of them because some of them are really like self-explanatory, but the others, the ones that are a little more complex, I'm going to use examples from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I hope you guys are all movie buffs and superhero buffs, because this is, like, let's be honest, this is the era of the superhero. This is the era of superhero movies. Just like in the 60s, it was the era, it's 50s and 60s, it was the era of the cowboy. 60s and 70s, it was the era of like romance or espionage or whatever. 70s was the era of the underdog and underdog movies, so to say. So similarly, right now, from the early 2000s till now, and I don't think it's showing any signs of receding, it is the era of the superheroes. So we need to get with the new program. These are the new mythologies. These are the, I call them atheist mythologies. That's how it works out, I guess. So they are good examples of like brand building, because in many ways, the Marvel Cinematic Universe follows the sort of tenets of storytelling within its own, behind the scenes situations as well. Like, I don't know if most of you know this, probably most of you do, but by 1998, the Marvel Comics group had lost practically all, like they were practically bankrupt, and they did not know what to do. So they decided that they were going to sort of like give away their biggest characters to different studios and make up some of the money and not go bankrupt and not shut shop. So they gave up the character rights to their biggest characters. Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, to different studios, to Fox, to whatever, to Universal, to Sony. They give Sony still has bits and pieces of Spider-Man. That's another story for another day, I guess. But they gave away their biggest characters, and by the time they sort of like recouped their losses and sort of like broke even in 2005 or 2006 or so, they decided that they need to start like making superheroes about. They need to make like stories based on like how they would want to show their superheroes to in their light or whatever. This is where the Iron Man movie came out in 2008, and thus far it has been like it has been the most exhilarating sort of series of movies, all sequels of each other, weirdly, sequels, prequels, whatever, all interconnected in this interwoven universe, but it's also the perfect example of brand, like sort of brand archetypes at play. Because if you think about it, okay, so firstly, let me just explain to you the primary archetypes. Okay, there are 12 archetypes. Okay, if you, depending on like who, not who you ask, but like depending on where you stand in terms of like your brand, because your brand needs those archetypes, and there are 12 archetypes which can be broadly sort of divided into 4 separate quadrants. Okay, in one quadrant, okay, there is the structure quadrant, which is about providing structure, providing whatever, providing control. So there are 3 archetypes there. The first one is the creator archetype, which is about innovation. The ruler archetype, which is about, you know, maintaining and exerting control. And then there is a caregiver archetype, which is about service and whatever, and providing service. Most service providers are caregiver archetypes. Then there is the connection quadrant. The connection quadrant has 3 separate like ventricles as well. Then there's the everyman, or the regular guy or girl. There is the jester, okay, and then there is the lover. I'll explain all of these in detail properly. Then, of course, is the legacy quadrant. The legacy quadrant has the hero archetype, which is one of the most common archetypes. Like for the longest time, there were like any brand that says we are the #1 brand technically is a hero archetype. The magician archetype, the outlaw archetype all fall into the sort of legacy archetype, that, you know, this will last beyond like these 10 years or 5 years. These are not about exit strategies at all. Okay, none of them, no legacy archetype wants to get a buyout. They just want to persevere and exist in the world and exist for centuries if they can. Then there's the final archetype of the paradise seekers. The paradise seekers are the archetypes include the explorer archetype, which is like the adventurer, like who just goes out and like sort of seeks the unknown. Okay, Indiana Jones would be a perfect example. Then there's the sage archetype, who's like very understanding and all-knowing at the same time. And then there's the innocent archetype, and I used to work with a brand which sort of followed the innocent archetype, which was Paperboard Drinks. I don't know if you guys are familiar. And I worked with the sort of initial brand building processes, and you know, sort of figuring out the tone and voice of the brand. And so within the innocent archetype, like, so there are even, for example, so like the basic tenet of an innocent archetype is that we are true to ourselves. We are honest. We are as honest as we can be. So there are honest drinks, the innocent drinks, like a lot of like good, like sort of preservative-free drinks love to use this archetype. Now I'll explain all of these to you one by one. I have made some slides, like, and I haven't sequenced them because that's how I work, I guess. So wait 1 second. We're gonna go by one in a roulette, but wait, let me just see if I can, how do I full screen this? Yes, there it is. 1 second. So before I do anything else, I will put you guys through this because I'm not very Zoom adept. As much as I look cool and young, I am none of those things. Wait, I'll just, if you guys can hear me. Okay. Ankit Singh asked me, I would like to ask, the storytelling could be personal or related to brands, or it could be based on fiction or non-fiction. And if a person wants to be a storyteller, then he or she must have began with, from which form? From what I'm gathering, you're trying to ask is, like, can it be like, does it have to be rooted in reality? No, it doesn't. It actually doesn't. It depends on how much your brand, like what direction you want your brand to go to. Because the brand storytelling, you can only choose a direction. The story that the brand tells will be determined by the passage of time itself. 1 second. Let me see if I can share screen. Am I allowed to share screen here? Yes. So this is yes. This is where we are. We're talking about archetypes, and I'm going to list some of the archetypes. Okay, the primary ones I'll sort of like brush through. But the specific ones I will explain with the example of existing Marvel Comics characters, because that's how I roll and there's nothing you can do about it. 1 second. So wait. So if you guys can see this, can you guys see what I'm showing? One second.
No, your screen is not shared.
Oh, wait. I'm a bit of a, yes. Okay. Can you guys see what I'm showing? Does it say archetypes?
Yes.
Okay. So we're discussing archetypes, and there are 12 main archetypes. I'm going to run past some of them. The main archetype that you might have heard, okay, and this is a book that you guys can read once you're done with this. This is homework. The book is called The Hero and the Outlaw, and it basically outlines how different brands like fall into different archetypes. And the hero archetype is the most popular archetype. It's the winner archetype. Okay, it's the archetype where you are basically, like, most sports brands are hero archetypes, like, and the hero archetype is not about being the hero. You understand? It's not about doing good. It is about perseverance. It is about stamina. It is about winning. The hero archetype is all about winning. It is not about anything else but winning. Do not fall into the trap of love. No, the hero is a do-gooder. No, that's not a do-gooder. A do-gooder is a different archetype. We'll get to that. The first archetype is the hero archetype, and the hero archetype is about winning. It's about giving 100%. It is about maximizing your potential. So technically, all superheroes fall into the hero archetype. It's the most overused archetype. It's used by Nike, Adidas, any sports brand that you can think of is a hero archetype. Hero Honda is a hero archetype, but again, it's not about superlative performance, but it's a hero archetype sort of mixed with the regular guy, but we'll get to that. Okay, let's look at another archetype. Okay, let's look at the innocent. Okay, this is where this is my background. I come from like paperboard, like paperboard rings. We try to sort of make the idea of the innocent, like by not adding preservatives, not adding whatever. The packaging was very safe and the packaging was very child friendly. The whole idea was to have the most sort of obviously, like, sort of like whatever, like the most like optimistic, the most like, so right now it says that an innocent brand is roughly like a very optimistic, a very happy, a very like sort of like cute, so to speak. In the most simplest of terms, it's a cute brand. It's like a googly woogly whoosh. That's an innocent. Okay, when Ponds did that with googly woogly whoosh, it decided to become an innocent brand. Before that, it was just run of the mill, whatever. But when they did the googly woogly whoosh campaign, they became the innocent. And they are all about nostalgia, about growing up, about being a child, about sort of accessing the child inside, about happiness, about spreading happiness, open happiness, whatever. Okay, their objective is to spread happiness. Okay, and it is about being as simple as you can without being naive, because the trap that an innocent brand can fall into is naivete. And you don't want to be a naive brand. You want to be smart, but you want to project innocence. You want to project, and by doing so, you need to do so in your own sort of general flow of work as well. The perfect example from Marvel Comics is Mantis, who basically, if you've seen Endgame, she has a very like innocent quality about herself, despite being very powerful. But we'll get into that later. The next archetype that I want to explain is the caregiver. Okay, the caregiver is a very maternal brand. It's a very like sort of like, it cares for you, it looks out for you, you can trust it. Okay, most sort of like most service providers are technically caregivers. Most hotels technically are caregivers, even though there is a bit of like a royal thing going on there, but mostly, like, for the larger part, they're caregivers. Apollo Hospitals is a caregiver. And they're about like being selfless, being generous, being kind. It's about like serving the larger sort of the greater good, so to speak. And Johnson and Johnson is a perfect example. Even there, and most caregiver brands have like sort of blue in their motif. Okay, for whatever reasons, they have blue, turquoise. They have that sort of a healing, sort of like a Red Cross. Red Cross technically again is a caregiver. Doctors Without Borders, again, caregivers. Okay, so the idea of a caregiver is that it's a selfless, it's a very, even if it's making money off you, it has to project that it is a selfless brand. It is more than, it is like a mother. It's like, what if a mother was a brand and that's the caregiver? The perfect example that I can think of from Marvel Comics, from the Marvel Comics universe, is Professor Hulk, when Hulk becomes a very gentle giant in the last movie, and he gives that taco to Ant-Man when he loses his taco. If you've seen that scene, it's a brilliant scene, and it's a perfect example of what a caregiver can be. After that comes the ruler. Okay, it's very self-explanatory. Okay, the ruler is about being responsible. It is not about winning. Okay, the ruler has already won. So it is the next stage after the hero. If there was a stage, there isn't, but if there was, that would be it. Okay, the idea is that a leader is a role model. It's beyond, he or she is someone that you emulate. There's someone that you look forward to, sort of like Steve Jobs as a person, okay, is a ruler. His brand is not a ruler brand, but him as a person is someone you want to emulate. Like it is about creating like order from chaos. It's about peacekeeping. It's about maintenance. The ruler is more about maintenance, and it's all about keeping like a sort of, being the, and for a ruler, for most ruler brands, you have to be a legacy brand as well. You have to have existed for more than 20, 30 years, and have to have that consistency. You have to have that consistency to become a ruler brand. So you can't just like decide that, okay, I'm going to be a ruler brand now, and I'm going to decide. This is something that the pedigree is going to come to you with time. And that is where you can change your brand to a ruler brand once you are in that space, once you've been that brand for that long. But perfect examples again, UN, Microsoft, Barclays, Audi. T'Challa from Black Panther. The Black Panther is a perfect example. He's a ruler. He cares about his people. He runs a whole thing. He's an administrator. This is the brand for administrators. Technically, Salesforce, the brand, is also a ruler in this situation, in this whole whatever. After this comes the outlaw. The outlaw is one of my favorite brand archetypes, because it is about non-conforming brand, like it's non-conforming to the status quo. It hates the status quo. Whenever something builds up, whenever the cobwebs of society set in, the outlaw comes in and changes everything. It's about game-changing innovations, people who are making things that no one ever has and are bashful, almost arrogant, borderline arrogant about it. And which is why the outlaw brand, while it's a very sort of successful prototype of archetype, so to speak, it is also not, it also has the highest chance of failing, because you're being bashful. You're just being like, yeah, I don't care. So your brand, your product has to be the most rock solid product. It has to be the most like game changing product. It needs to be the most paradigm shifting product that you can ever imagine. And once you have that product, you can, if depending on like, who you're sort of contesting against, are you changing society, or are you changing the general accepted ways and means of doing something? Okay, are you changing, is it a new software? Technically, Zoom is an outlaw. Okay, they don't need to do the branding, but there's sort of branding that has sort of existed. Like right now at this point, Zoom has changed the game. Okay, in terms of, even though like Zoom competitors have existed in the market for so long, like Skype, whatever, and Zoom has come in and snap, gone. Okay, Google cannot compete with Zoom, and Zoom was like a tiny company like that did e-learning stuff for like the last 2 years or so, and now it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It, without wanting to, it has become the outlaw. Perfect examples again, Harley Davidson, Thumbs Up. Okay, Thumbs Up technically chases the outlaw sort of like whatever, because it has that like, a consistent fan base. So the whole idea of like someone who jumps off a building and whatever for a thumbs up, it's a very outlawish whatever. Even early Apple, if you remember the Apple advertisement that they did, which was like a sort of a comparative advertisement that they did against IBM, where they made IBM look like the bad guys from 1984. And they did a whole like, this is why 1984 is no longer going to be like 1984. And they sort of like changed the game in that sense. Early Apple, because they were challenging. They're challengers. If you're a challenger brand, you're the outlaw. Perfect example again is Wolverine from X-Men. No explanation required there, I guess, I hope. After that comes the regular. Okay, the regular guy, the everyman, the every woman. Okay, the idea of the regular is that they are decent, down to earth, reliable. They believe in doing the right things for the right reasons. They're not in it for the money. They're not in it for the accolades. They're just doing it because they're honest to good, honest to goodness, whatever people. They're good Samaritans. They are doing good for the sake of good and nothing else. They want to belong. They want to make connections. They want to make, they want to connect people, which is why, like, I think early Nokia, when Nokia, I mean, there is Nokia, but it's no longer the same Nokia that we knew. The reliable Nokia that we knew, that changed the whole thing, but was very humble about it. The brand also has to be very humble. The regular guy has to be super humble, despite being, you could be, selling top of the line innovations, but you have to make it look like, I'm just like one of you, I'm just like you, I don't have to do anything to tell you that I'm different from you. You do not, as a regular brand, you cannot look like you're too ambitious. You cannot look like you're too what's the word? You cannot look like you're too above everyone. You have to be one with the masses. Okay, you have to be like technically the best regular guy branding, okay, in religion, in whatever, if you think about it, is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the best regular guy. He's a son of God, but he exists amongst mortals and he talks to everyone. He walks around and sort of and is a nurturing sort of presence. LIC, again, within our Indian examples, I think LIC is the perfect example. Spider-Man from Spider-Man Homecoming, if you've seen that movie, is the perfect example of the regular guy. Before he gets the nice suit or whatever, he makes his own homemade suit, which you can see here. And the homemade suit also sort of it shows that he has like grit and sort of his own way of existing outside of the regular paradigm, but at the same time he wants to be one of, he wants to help people so bad that he, before he could get a good suit, he just decides, what, I'm going to help people. And that's what this is. That's what the regular guy is. It's about helping. The magician, very self-explanatory, like Marvel comic character counterpart. He's imaginative. She is imaginative, spiritual. It's visionary. It's about transforming your world. It's transforming your world with a certain, in a way that you can never sort of, the world will never be the same again after this, after the inflection of this brand. So Doctor Strange is perfect in that regard because, after Doctor Strange showed up in the Marvel universe, there was suddenly magic everywhere. So it's like, oh, it's no longer just a technological universe. It's also about magic. It's also about seeing like different dimensions and realities and whatnot. And I think there's one more movie coming up called Doctor Strange and the Madness of the Multiverse. And that basically that basically shows Doctor Strange going into different parallel realities. And I hope this Corona thing dies down enough for us to see that movie, because I think it's going to be bonkers. I feel. I'm not, by the way, I'm not getting paid by Marvel, just letting everyone know. I'm just a huge fan. Sorry for being a complete fanboy, but this is how I sort of perceive the world. And I hope that, it explains things better for you guys as well. Perfect example is the parent company of the Avengers, of Marvel, of whatever, is Disney. If you look at Disney's general whatever is about transformation. It is about people going from like being complete nobodies to becoming like something beyond godly to a certain degree, and changing the world as a result. And that is there with every Pixar movie. That is there with every whatever. It is about the journey that you take that changes the world, and as a result you yourself, which is a very important concept in storytelling. It's about, you have to transformation is very necessary. If you're posed with a hardship, you cannot let that hardship turn you bitter and useless. You have to transform as a result of that hardship, as a result of that challenge, as a result of that of that sort of crucible that you're placed into. The next one we're going to talk about is the jester. The jester is like not my favorite, but it's the one that I have the most fun with. It's the one that everyone has the most fun with. The idea of the jester is that it's an irreverent brand. It's an interesting, it's like I said, I've written it there, like it's fun, it's impulsive. Okay. It is also about questioning the status quo, but sort of subverting the status quo instead of directly fighting it. It is about like making fun of something till it no longer is a threat. If there is for a lot of jester brands are not taken very seriously, because they were like, okay, this is not like, lot of jester brands are not jester brands as much as their marketing is a jester. Okay, the product kind of cannot be a jester, because then it's not a reliable product. Only the marketing can be a jester. Perfect example again is Wendy's social media. If you go by the Wendy's fast food outlets, the social media, they're very sort of tongue in cheek about their whole thing. But their food cannot be jester. You cannot have like, suddenly you can't have a crayon in the middle of a burger. Okay, that will shut them down. Another good example is Old Spice. If the new branding of Old Spice, because if you remember, the old branding was very sort of stoic. It was very like, there was a ship and there was like classical music playing in the background. It was a very sort of the royal. It was pretty much a royal brand, so to speak. But that wasn't working out for them. They weren't selling many people. Like most, granddads were buying that, but like after granddads, I don't think dads and their kids were buying that. So they switched their branding almost instantaneously. Not instantaneously, like it took them a lot of time. They switched their branding, and they made it very tongue-in-cheek. If you've seen the Old Spice ads, which sort of created this wave of change in different brands, like including the Dollar Shaving Club and the like, all of them sort of emulating the same things that Old Spice put out there, because it was such a serious brand. So when it decided to flip, and that is where the storytelling element comes in, they changed the character almost entirely. And that in any other situation would have been complete suicide for a brand. But because they did it so well and they executed it so beautifully, so craftily, and so that they became the industry standard for so long. I mean, it's even now, like I think it started out like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I'm not sure. And it has been going on since then. No Super Bowl ad has been the same after Old Spice's "Look at me, now look at the screen, look at me, look at the screen," whatever. But I think I'm paraphrasing it. Obviously, it's not the same. Bingo is the perfect example in India. And if you remember, Hippo had great social media. They had a great sort of like tongue-in-cheek, like Hippo used to talk like a cartoon hippo. It used to be like, me and talk like this. Like it was very cute. I think the remnants of that brand are still there on social media. It's fun to go through that. And after which I'm going to go into the Explorer. The Explorer, I think like I believe like most brands, like any off-roading car brand, okay, is an Explorer technically. Any brand that is about like being the individual, being a pioneer, not being mainstream, being sort of, and the Explorer cannot be mainstream. An Explorer brand cannot be seen mingling with the masses. It is about someone who sort of leaves the comfort of their home to sort of be in the wild, to seek out, like Bear Grylls technically is an Explorer. Not technically, very explicitly is an Explorer brand himself, Bear Grylls, and he's an adventurer. And he seeks the unknown. He sort of survives in the elements. It's about survival in the elements. It's about it's a very masculine sort of like just the same way a caregiver is a very feminine, very maternal branding. The Explorer is a very masculine, is a very traditionally masculine branding that you can choose once you're, especially if you are, if your branding is about survival in the elements. It could be the Kathmandu, jackets. They have those Kathmandu jacket brands. You have whatever. You have North Face. You have any jacket brand, any kind of anything that helps you survive in the cold, in the in the heat, in the wherever, and any brand that sort of like any army brand, any army based sort of like branding is the Explorer branding. Right after that, let me get into the creator branding. And the creator branding is most of you right now, right here. Most of you, I am assuming, are innovative, artistic, and perfectionists. And that's why you're all here, because you don't want to leave any stone unturned. And that is ideal for the creator archetype. The creator archetype is inventive and entrepreneurial. All of you are creators in that sense. Okay. Apple right now is a creator brand. Okay. Tesla is a creator brand. Okay. It is about innovating. It's about, it is also about perseverance. And the creator brand has the most it's the one of the most rounded archetypes that you can have if your product is solid and your intent is solid. You cannot fumble as with a creator brand. You cannot, but Elon Musk somehow has subverted this as well. He has sort of made himself a separate brand. Okay, it could be somewhere between a jester or a regular guy, and he has sort of, because if you remember, like before, like right now, of course, the space launch that happened, the SpaceX launch that happened was very successful and everyone loved that. But what everyone, forgets is that there were so many points where like he was the launches, the sort of the rockets that were not landing, they were exploding, and a lot of like the prototypes were sort of failing. But because he kept showing the failures as well, everyone sort of felt like, everyone felt like rooting for the underdog. Okay. So the underdog element, again, does not exist with the creator, but it exists with the regular guy and it exists with the jester. You want them to do well because they're trying their hardest. And you're like, no, you know what? I'm not gonna shit on someone just because they're failing, but because they're being so honest about their failures that you want them to grow, that you want them to become a legacy brand. Yeah, so an Iron Man, of course, is the perfect example of the creator who keeps innovating, who keeps changing his armor. He starts out with the most like clunky, bhandi bartan, like utensil looking armor in the first movie. And then he sort of like keeps like changing the armor. The second movie, he becomes about, he gets a suitcase armor. The third movie, he gets an armor that can piece itself separately, when he, causes like makes a gesture. And then in the final movies, obviously, he has a nanotech armor, which is almost as powerful as anything in the universe, as we see in the final scene. Again, please watch the Marvel movies. They're perfect examples of what I'm trying to explain. And yeah, so this is, these are the sort of highlights that I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to stop screen sharing and show my beautiful face. Hello, everyone. And now I see a lot of questions being placed here. So I'm going to answer them one by one because time is of the essence, but I would love to answer them. Okay. Hero archetype would be like Nike. Yes, Nike is the perfect hero archetype. Air Jordans, Michael Jordan. So hero is the most, like, if you have a endurance based brand, hero is the perfect archetype. Ramalingam Subramani asks, should one be an extrovert and public speaker to be a great storyteller? Not at all, not at all, not one bit. But they need to have a certain imagination, and they need to have, they need to be aware of situations. They need to be, they need to have a good head on their shoulders and need to have a story to tell. Like, you don't need to, you don't need to be a public speaker, so to speak. You can just read off a teleprompter and then just nod your head like, you know what was happening in the first place. Okay, what would be brands like Amul and Mother Dairy also caregivers? Yes, Ankit Singh, you're right. They are caregivers, and they are the perfect, like any brand that takes care of you. You think of yourself, like what brand exemplifies a mother? Like, what is the most motherly brand? What's the nicest thing someone can do? Nice is the like the sort of the essence, the soul of the caregiver. And how is a startup e-commerce brand like Big Basket, how should they position their brand? So Big Basket already, so I think, like, because I think the way they went about it was a little wrong, because they chose Shah Rukh Khan to be the brand ambassador. And Big Basket, I think, is a regular guy or regular person brand. It's not a exemplar brand. It's not a big whatever brand. Like, it's not about leaving a legacy. It is about doing regular things, being one with the masses, and being very dependable and reliable. Of course, Shah Rukh Khan to a certain degree does show that, reliability or whatever, because he's a reliable person. He's very affable. He's one of us despite being above us. I get that. But at the same time, no one buys that Shah Rukh Khan buys his stuff from Big Basket. because he clearly buys it from food hall or, you know, Nature's Basket. So let's not even pretend like he has ever been there. What is and how
Utsav, Utsav, just
yeah,
a quick question. You were just answering the question. So,
sure.
my name is Ranjit, and I am running a startup brand.
Okay.
Something very similar to Big Basket. So my question was more like, let's imagine Big Basket does a hyperlocal delivery kind of thing. That's a thing, right? Irrespective of the brand ambassador, right? So we are also doing something like that, which is like hyperlocal kind of delivery. In that way, in that case, how should we position ourselves as into the market? See, this market is already overcrowded with
Of course.
and all that. When we are launching something new, how best do you think that we brand it so that it'll reach the right kind of people as well, and the right audience get into the
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. So I think among the archetypes, your positioning, I think, like I said, has to be like done perfectly as the ideal guy, as the ideal regular guy. You have to be the regular person. You have, because you cannot start a new brand saying that we are the best when you have nothing to sort of. So the moment you say you're the best, A, you have to prove it. And B, if you fail to prove it, especially in a sort of like in a world where everything is being watched and assessed every single second of the day, you cannot, like any other branding would feel, you know, I would feel like you're cheating, you know, conceptually cheating someone. So the regular guy branding, I suggest look up the regular guy branding or the everyman branding. And that is the best branding that you can do for your brand, because your brand is about reaching out to people and being one with the people and helping people out in a time of crisis. You can add a tinge of caregiver, because I don't think any archetype exists in a vacuum. They exist with like a tinge of something else. Like all the Marvel heroes are technically the hero archetype because they're winning, but they're also different archetypes within that archetype. So I think I hope I explained this to you well. Ranjit, are you still there?
Yes.
And I think you should keep it as humble and as self-effacing as you can, because because you are going up against juggernauts at this point, and you have to do the David Goliath sort of a situation, because David in this story is, while he wins and he's a hero, but he is the regular guy. He's one of us. Okay.
Thank you, Utsav.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking this question. It's a nice question. Let me Puma 18 Puma by Virat Kohli would be a creator, ruler, or outlaw. Just because there's Virat Kohli, I think it's an outlaw. It's a mix of ruler and outlaw. Like early Virat Kohli would have been an outlaw, but current ruler Virat Kohli is a ruler because he's the captain, whatever, and so on and so forth. And people like depend on him. And he is a ruler with outlaw inclinations. So I think that is Ankit. And then Suyash Pable asks everyone, how storytelling affects putting a price tag on a new product, especially for a new entrepreneur, the one who is a bit novice in branding and storytelling. I'm not really figuring out. That depends on where you want to place yourself. Where is your mental pedigree? Like how much, like, are you going to make a profit? I mean, what product are you selling? That depends on what product are you selling. If you could tell me what product it is, then I can explain to you a little better. Sabu Francis asks, how to position my new product to differentiate from competitors. What is the difference between archetypes and stereotypes? Simplest answer is archetypes are positive, stereotypes are negative. Positive archetypes, like for example, even like positive stereotypes are technically negative. Okay, if someone says that all Indians are IT guys, okay, all Indians are IT guys or doctors, even that can be construed as like, you know, it can be construed as pigeonholing. But an archetype is something where, you know, people look up to, like, even if it's like an archetype, even if it's a negative archetype, can be something that people can be something that people you know, can look up to and sort of emulate to a certain degree. Worst example of a negative archetype, but like most ideal way of explaining it it is such a terrible thing to say, but like for example, serial killers, they develop a fan following, okay, because they are archetypical villains. Their archetypes, that archetype is that of a villain, and because they're villains, people with, you know, who are a little cuckoo or who are a little, you know, effed in the head, they try to emulate their actions, and this is where, like, so in that sense, you know, serial killers have better branding than, you know, someone stereotyping like all black people do this, all brown people do this, all Chinese people do this, and so on and so forth, I feel. And Sabu asks also how to position my new product to differentiate from competitors. That depends what your new product is and who your competitors are. What you need to, if everyone's basically have to swim upstream, I feel like if everyone is going in one direction, you have to go in the other, because, you know, you might have seen that picture of like people giving the sort of Hitler salute to Hitler, and then one guy is standing like angrily, and that has been a very iconic picture. So that you need to be that person who's not conforming to every, so that in that sense, an outlaw branding would be the most ideal branding. But you're also sort of, you have to be very careful about how you go about it, because you're also setting yourself up to fail, because you're making the stakes that much higher. Sorry, yes. Please share the resources about archetypes. I will, but the archetypes that you need to sort of, the book that you need to read is a book called The Hero and the Outlaw. It's available on this thing on Amazon, and the Outlaw. You should read up this book, and it has the most perfect. Wait, this has been okay. Archetypes are individualistic and stereotypes are generalizations. No identity, question mark. Arun Bhatia asks. Yes, so archetypes are not necessarily individualistic, because archetypes are also about, you know, some archetypes are about, you know, connecting with people. Some archetypes are about, you know, working in a group, working in a, like, so it is not necessarily like an individualistic pattern, but most archetypes, yes. An outlaw archetype, an adventurer archetype, a creator archetype, and a hero archetype are very individualistic in their whole whatever, but a caregiver archetype or an innocent archetype would not be too individualistic in that regard. They're just going to be like, you know, I just want to hang out with everyone else. A regular guy, obviously, again, is not individualistic, is very community driven and community engaging with the community and sort of helping out and whatever. What else is there? The details about the book. That was, yes. Position my Sabu Francis. Blah, blah. Is anyone else has something else? There's one more message. If you guys have anything else. Several years back, there was a buzz around the book Positioning by Trout and Rees. Spoke about how to win position in the mind of the customer. Yes, I have heard of this book. I have not read this book myself, so I will plead ignorance on this. But brand positioning in general is a very important, because brand positioning is very similar to what I'm explaining here, in this sense that, like, it's like choosing a path. Okay, a positioning is like basically you are at a crossroads and you have 4 different paths to sort of choose between: north, south, east, west. You can also choose to make a hole in the ground and go underground and come out of the other end if you want that, if you have the resources. So positioning is about choosing a vector, choosing like one direction that you can go into, and that you cannot. So once you choose that positioning, you cannot sort of stray from that positioning almost immediately. You have to go, you have to run the mile, you have to reach the finish line. And if you can, and if you can't, obviously, like that's where you sort of stray and take the other routes or whatever. But this is, imagine like deciding that I'm going to be this person now. Like it's like choosing to be, I'm going to be virtuous, or I'm going to be understanding, or I'm going to be whatever, you know, that you want to be in this whole situation. So yeah. Keeping 1 second. Yeah. So 1 second. What is the story of Aldite, for example? They sawed a Volkswagen in half and stuck it on a billboard. Nobody had heard of Aldite before that. Uh, yeah. So they did a very outlaw thing. Like any competitive, any kind of comparison branding is technically an outlaw branding, and they position themselves as the outlaw. They position themselves as like the sort of the risk takers in this in this situation. But yeah, this I did not know about this, so I am learning from this. So I think this is very the it's a very full circle moment for me in this situation. And the importance of brand positioning statement in brand building and how to brainstorm positioning statements for any brand. Okay. That can boil down to what are you most comfortable with. You get your people, you get everyone with yourself. And once you are like properly, comfortable with going with because once you choose a positioning, it's really hard to go back. It's really hard to sort of like say that, nope, this is, we were just kidding around. You're a brand, you're not a person. You cannot make many mistakes. Okay. You're not allowed many mistakes as a brand. As a person, maybe you are. Okay. But even if you become a brand, you're not even allowed mistakes as a person then. So you have to be very careful about how you position yourself in this situation. And so the brainstorming can become like whatever your company or what your team is the most comfortable with. If your team is the most comfortable with being an outlaw, then go for the outlaw. If your team is the most comfortable with being like the hero, like if it's comfortable being a jester, because a jester, while it's a great way to get attention, but at the same time it's very exhausting. It is very like you have to be interesting all the time. The moment you become even slightly boring, that branding goes for a toss. It goes away almost entirely. Yeah, so I think that about covers it. I hope I'm making sense. If anyone has any other questions, please field them right now. I'm still here for another 5 to 10 minutes because I came late and I shall stay late. That's how it works. It's about overtime, and you guys have. Wait 1 second. Having a strong, Mayakini Bose asks, having a strong differentiator factor for a new brand that's competing with many juggernauts in the market is very important. But at the same time, it needs to stay regular to strike with the masses. How to strike a balance? Okay. So, so firstly, you need to decide what you want to be. Okay. If you want to be like, for example, if you are competing with juggernauts, if you're competing with people, brands that have never sort of like, faced challenge. Okay. And you're the first challenger in this whole whatever. The ideal way to challenge any brand or sort of make a mark is technically, you can, I mean, in the earlier days, you could have just done an outlaw branding and then sort of figured out like, the sawing a Volkswagen in half. That's a very perfect example of an outlaw branding. But since you're competing with so many like brands, the best way to sort of make an impact, and at the same time, depending on what your product is. Okay, if it's a product, if you're a service provider, then you have to be a caregiver. Okay, you have to be a caregiver or a regular person or an everyman or whatever. But you cannot be a jester if you're being if you're a service provider. Imagine like Airtel being funny. There's a reason why Idea, even though the ads were perfect, if you think about it, they were such a differentiating ad, whatever processes. Idea had the best, and Idea can change your life, had the best ads, that any service provider, telecom service provider in the country had. But they always trailed in the back because that branding did not fit the product, because the product depends on a certain reliability that you need to sort of succeed. And once you sort of veer off from that, like you don't want to be, you can have a funny doctor, but you can't have an unreliable doctor, right? So in that sense, like for you, so whatever branding you choose, depending on what your product is, Mankini, if you, I don't know what your product is, but if your product is sort of a service driven or whatever, you cannot be the jester. But if it's a product, if it's a new sort of, if it's, depending on what the product is, you choose that branding. But a regular guy is the safest way. That every man is the safest way to sort of enter the market and be one with everyone. And innocent branding is also perfect in that sense, because you can basically say that, you know what, I'm not going to do any advertisement. I'm going to let my product speak for itself. I'm just going to give samples of the product to everyone, and then I'm going to have people talk about that product. So most innocent branding does not rely on branding as much as it relies on word of mouth. So if you can figure that out, if you can figure out that situation, then you can use the innocent branding as well, depending again on what your product is. I am spitballing. I'm not completely aware of what your product is, but it is in the fashion category, apparel and accessories. So yes, so in that sense, you have to sort of choose to be, you have to be the lover. So the lover branding is the perfect example. So a lover would be, most fashion outlets are lover brand, like any sort of Marie Claire, any makeup brand, Fenty, all of these are lover, like primary lover brands. Okay, even this one, Lakme, of course, in India is a lover brand. So if you take the lover archetypes, look up the lover archetype, you can put in the everyman situation within the lover archetype, that we want everyone to look good, and we want every one of us. So for example, what you're suggesting has been sort of has been tried by Big Bazaar. If you remember Big Bazaar's, like that general whole, like we made affordable fashion and affordable whatever, that was the everyman whatever. But the thing is, since you're running apparel, this thing, yes, I could share the deck, but the deck is just a bunch of JPEGs. I can send it to Talvinder, and then I can, one second, and then like I can, or Piyush actually, and then he can send it to all of you. I can send you that. Wait, same time, blah blah. Okay, now Tanpreet Singh asks, is there any template or framework which you follow for creating brand stories? It is, I mean, there are enough frameworks. There is the cheat sheet that you can look up, brand archetypes, and go to Google Images, and you can find the 12 brand archetypes. And once you find the 12 archetypes, you have to figure out which one is you. But there is no template per se, because that depends on that. That's the whole idea of an archetype, because it's so deeply personal. You cannot half-ass this. You have to sort of like, oh wow, you have to sort of look at the soul of the brand, okay? Because it is introspection. Because at the end of the day, you are, imagine like your favorite song, okay? You have your favorite song in the whole world, and then you turn that favorite song into your ringtone. After 10 days or so, you are sick of your favorite song, because that's how repetition sort of like drills it into your head and sort of makes it unpalatable or boring or bland. So think about it very carefully in terms of, if you want your, if you want to choose, your brand archetype, your brand story, or your brand, like the genre of your filmmaking, so to speak, in the sense that, do you want to make a horror film? Do you want to make a comedy film? Do you want to make an action film? So you need to decide that first. Where does your heart, and it's a very non-intuitive, it's a very intuitive sort of zone that you have to exist in. You have to ask that, where does my brand fall in this larger scheme of things? What is my brand's goal? If my brand's goal is to change the world, then it's a magician brand. If my brand's goal is to exist in the world and make everyone happy, then it's an innocent brand, or it's a caregiver brand, or it's depending on what your brand is, what your brand's goal is. You can basically find what the general brand is. You have to find the end. You need to find the last. You need to know the ending of the story to write the beginning, is what I would say. Can you suggest some books? Brand Archetypes. The best book again is this is so there is one second. You need to read. So again, I think like I've written it to someone, but you need to read Hero and the Outlaw. I think that's the best thing you can do. It's very crisply written, and it is very. Ria Raj asks, how can you explain? Can you elaborate on how to approach branding for disrupting an already existing established domain? So for that, you need to undertake what is called like guerrilla branding. Essentially, you need to figure out where, because if you're disrupting, you are either disrupting with the product or with the marketing. So if you have a product first approach to disrupting the general status quo, then you're pretty much sold. Like then you're pretty much that. Then the product is doing most of the work. But if you're doing a marketing driven sort of a approach to the whole thing, I think the best way to do it is if you take is basically, I think, the gesture branding. The gesture branding is ideal in this approach of things. Like if you want to make fun of something, if you want to make memes of something, because like you can be immortalized in two ways in this world of ours, in this sort of larger world that we exist in. You can be immortalized in two ways. One is that you build a legacy. Or the second one is that you become a meme, and that's a very different conversation. But if you make a meme of something, you immortalize them in the most, it can be positive or negative, but a meme is almost always an object of ridicule. So when if you remember JCB ki khudai, there was a meme going on about like the JCB digging things. And that, I don't think it helped JCB's stocks that much, although it created awareness about the brand, but it created awareness in the wholly, completely wrong demographic. So you need to figure out like what your demographic is. And once you have your demographic, is your demographic young? Is your demographic old? If your demographic is old, then it's harder to disrupt, I feel. If your demographic is young, it's much easier to disrupt, someone's established domain, because all you have to do is just sort of, troubleshoot, their product and sort of like point out their product's policies, and then explain to the public how your product is going to take care of where they failed, essentially. So you can sort of sideswipe them in that sense, and sort of, establish yourself in the larger sort of, social media or whatever narrative. Pappu Paas Ho Gaya by Cadbury would be a jester? Not really. Pappu Paas Ho Gaya by Cadbury would be very close to the everyman. It's a regular slice of life thing that has happened. Okay, so it is not based on Pappu Paas Ho Gaya. Even though it's a hilarious, funny thing, it's still a hilarious, funny thing that that can happen in any normal family, and that is where the everyman branding comes in. The jester branding has to have an element again of magic in it. Okay, even though it's not the magician brand, it also has to have that sort of. Deadpool is the most ideal sort of jester brand, like I said. So it would be an everyman. It would be a regular guy. It would be a regular person. How would you position and market a law firm? A law firm is, so a law firm, technically the best positioning for a law firm has to be the hero branding, because you're about winning. You're not about the process. You're not about of course you're about the due process, but I'm like, it's not about you are a goal-oriented, firm. You're a goal-oriented product. Your product entirely exists on the premise that you are going to win. If you're going to win, then you need to be a hero. And for that's where like most law firms need to position themselves with a lot of confidence, with a lot of like, we are going to stay with you through the thick and thin. We will stay with you for 2 years. So it's about endurance. It is about, it is about stamina to a great degree. So you need to figure out like a very classy way You need to sort of blend the royal and you need to blend the royal and this thing, what I just said, the hero branding together to create like this sort of like, we will fight for you. You are the Atticus Finch. You are going to sort of, so you can technically be the outlaw in this whole situation. Okay, if you think about Better Call Saul, technically is an outlaw legal advisor. But again, that is in fiction, and I don't think that would really work in real life. I mean, it would, but in a larger sense of the term, you need to sort of establish a certain pedigree when you're, especially when you're working with law, clients in law and whatever, and people need to feel a sense of dependability that can only happen with you being the hero. The hero branding is the king in this situation. Da, 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 da. 1 second. So there is, okay, Sabu Francis writes, mine is a SaaS product, teamtwine.com, a new way of managing teams using a multiplayer game kind of environment, along with serious stuff like Kanban board, Gantt, etc. Competitors are Slack, Microsoft. Using a multiplayer game kind of environment. This is a disruptor. You are a disruptor, sir. So your disruptor positioning has to be like, it can be an outlaw in that sense, in the sense that you are changing the game to a certain degree. So I think, yeah, you should be like, you should sort of have elements of an outlaw, because I don't think that you are not about throwing the, the board out almost entirely. But I would say somewhere between a creator and an outlaw, that's where you exist as a brand. And I think everyone needs to understand that all these archetypes were written in the 1920s, 1930s, and so on and so forth. So since then, brands and whatever have evolved. And the thing is, once you choose your path, you can change your path, but you need to go like, you need to run a mile in that path before you change your path. It's not like you are stuck in that branding. Like Old Spice was, was technically like a very old school, proper, uncle, a grandfather sort of a brand. And then it flipped and became the Jester. And now everyone's like, that's the new branding. That led to a lot of sales in the 18 to 25 whatever demographic. So you need to keep in mind that you can, firstly, that your brand archetypes are not for life. You can change them, but you cannot change. It's like changing your Facebook name every 2 days. Okay, after a point, Facebook will ban your account, because they're like, no, you can't change your name like that often. Okay, you need to figure out, you need to stick to your name as much, because it's your name. It is the name. It is the it's the heart that you're choosing to go ahead with. And so if you have that going, so once you have that main branding going on, you can have a bit of a side, like a masala branding that you can sprinkle from time to time, but that main branding needs to be focused and unrelenting. And if it doesn't work out, that's when you can flip and sort of try another branding. You can choose to, rebrand your entire product. You can choose to, change your name, whatever, whatever works. But till then, like, you have to really stick with it. It's a commitment thing. So it is about because you're inspiring loyalty by telling someone your story. Okay, this is not about just impressing people. Brand archetypes are not about impressing people. It is about connecting with people. Who is M? But okay, so that's all, I guess. Who's here?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. So thanks a lot, Utsav, for conducting such an insightful session for pragmatic leaders.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry for being late again. And I hope everyone is at home safe. And because let's be honest, this is a very, very interesting time we are all living in right now. And all of us, like, especially those who are working from home or whatever, because this is the future. So you need to figure out if your brand can exist in this. Once you can figure out this brand existing in this world, it's this weird world that we live in, that brand can exist in any world. This is the Agni Pariksha. This is the sort of trials of Hercules that we have to go through, that everyone has to go through. And even I'm trying to make a brand, but we'll talk about that later once I've actually succeeded with it. So right now, all I'm giving you is just free advice. And I hope everyone is having everyone, figures out their little niche. And if anyone needs to reach out to me, I'm always there on LinkedIn, and we can, you can, take that forward, ask me the right questions. We can, figure out like a Zoom session separately. Again, thank you everyone. Thank you for your wonderful questions, and they're very insightful. Some of them I learned myself, like the Volkswagen car thing. I did not know. This is a very interesting thing that I need to look up now. But yeah, thank you again, and I hope to do this sooner than later. And good night, Shabak.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Utsav.
All
It
right.
was great
Yes.
to meet you.
All right.
And yeah, thank you for the entire
Thank you.
class.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
So guys, this session will be posted on our YouTube channel. I'll share link of the recorded session with you all in our Slack community. If any one of you have not joined our Slack community yet, I'm sharing the link in chat section. You can go and join our community.
Yeah,
And we
join
have,
the community. Please be active there. Plenty of good action. Got a lot of good resources are shared. Plus, very soon, Utsav will be taking a proper long-term course as well with us around brand, around story, and around creating building your skills around storytelling. So if you're interested in everything, please be active on Slack. We'll be making announcements very soon.